my presentation, the title of my presentation is The Politics of Bounding in Europe's Migration Crisis. It's the same title as a paper that has been published in 2018, a Colford piece published in 2018. I'm going to talk about migrant categories, such as economic migrant and refugee, and the purpose that they serve and the consequences that they have on migrants' rights. I will more specifically draw upon interviews with 215 people who crossed from Turkey to Greece in late 2015 and early 2016. Now, I think that these are still issues that are very, very relevant to today. So let me show you a little bit what I mean. The focus of the political and media debate during and in the aftermath of the 2015-2016 migration crisis has been largely on 4 or 5 issues. First, the drama of the perilous journeys across the Mediterranean. Second, smugglers facilitating irregular crossings. Third, hardships endured during the journey or the arrival. Whether or not newcomers are actually economic migrants, and whether newcomers should remain in the first countries to which they arrive. However, this is quite a bit of a Western-centric gaze, right, which tells us only a small part of a much bigger story. It gives the impression of a linear, uninterrupted flow of people heading towards Europe, which is most commonly represented by straight arrows on the map linking 2 distinct areas. It also reinforces the tendency to focus almost exclusively on the beginning and end of people's journeys and to neglect everything in between. And it distorts our understanding of the extent to which people make choices about where and when they move. There is a flawed assumption that those with agency are not deserving or in need of protection, and thus can be categorized as voluntary or economic migrants. However, it's not only economic migrants who make decisions about when and where to go. Forced migrants make decisions too, but when they do, this is used against them to delegitimize their protection claims. The decisions made by individuals and their families to leave their countries of origin or transit are far more complex than typically presented. The categories refugee and migrant do not simply exist out there as empty vessels into which people can be placed in some neutral ordering process. Categories are the outcome of social and political negotiations, reflecting the relative power of different groups. Implicit and sometimes explicit in this process of construction are ideas relating to the choices and agency of those who move. And at the heart of this process lies the flawed assumption that only migrants choose where and when to migrate. Refugees don't. However, the vast majority of the people we interviewed in Greece amid the 2015-16 so-called migration crisis mentioned factors that can be described as forced migration, including conflict, persecution, violence, death threats, and human rights abuse. These were the dominant themes in interviews with respondents from Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, and also Yemen. Political and economic factors come together to shape the experiences of those living in times of war. The longer the conflict continues, the more complicated and difficult to unpack this relationship becomes. Conflict has devastated the economic infrastructure of Syria, Iraq, and Yemen. Price increases have been exacerbated by internal displacement, and based on our interviews, 34% of internally displaced Syrians moved on for reasons that are usually labeled as economic, such as lack of access to labor market, exploitation, no access to healthcare or education. In other cases, individuals and families were unable to work and support their families because of rules that were imposed on them, most notably by ISIS. 28% of our respondents said that the activities of ISIS were a significant factor in their decision to leave, particularly for those in Syria, but also those in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Yemen. To conclude, I think that this doodle sums everything up, sums everything I'm trying to say. It's the best illustration of my argument here. So this was handed to me by a 20-year-old Afghan man who was raised in Iran during my research fieldwork on the island of Lesbos in Greece in the peak of the crisis in 2015. In this doodle, this young man has managed to fit in all forms of threat and discrimination that ethnic Hazara Afghans face in Iran: persistent poverty and unemployment, hunger, lack of access to education, discrimination in public spaces, inter-ethnic tensions, and human rights abuses. It clearly illustrates how political and economic factors come together for forced migrants. And it also shows the importance of what happens in between or else in transit countries in migrant journeys. Thank you very much.